Were you told you were shy? Do you identify as shy? Do you hate that word now? Do you just wish you could get over it and get on with your life? Welcome to Shining Beyond Shy, empowering you to create a greater life than you ever thought was possible. With your Shining Beyond Shy host, Fiona Cups. So welcome everybody to Shining Beyond Shy, and I'm really excited to have this week Steve Fredlund. And I meant to ask you how you pronounced your surname because I speak German and I may have over-Germanized it. So Steve Fredlund.
Well, that's how we'll say it in German. Here in the US, we say Fredlund, but I'm fine with the German pronunciation. That's cool.
Okay, and you at the moment, you have a long, varied history of all kinds of things, and at the moment your tagline is helping leaders become happier, which I love. And so you've been in the corporate world, the charity world, and you talk about, your bio says you're a sought after innovator engaged to solve the most complex problems, and I love that.
Yeah, that's what I've been up to. So it's been recently just trying to figure out like what is the common thread through all I've done, because like you said, I've done so many different things and I've been like, what is the common thread? And what it is it's innovation, it's problem solving, and it almost doesn't even matter what the thing is. Like, because people are saying, well, you got to pick a track, you got to pick a lane, you got to pick an industry. And what I found about myself is that I'm really multi-passionate, and it doesn't really matter what the problem even is. If there's a problem that I'm invited in to solve, I get excited about that, and I love doing that. And so that's what I've been doing, and I've become more comfortable with that as my niche rather than a specialist in marketing or in corporate America or whatever it might be.
I love that, and also I am specializing in Shining Beyond Shy. I have so many other things, and it's like, yes, I'm willing to put myself out there with this primarily, but please, I'm not going to give up this, and this, because I think for me, when I do that, I lose part of me. It's like, it's not, I mean, fortunately, there's more to me than just having been shy and not being shy anymore. There are all kinds of other stuff going on. So yeah, I love that. And when you wrote to me asking about this podcast, you said that you used to be shy. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah, it's. I think a lot of people that knew me back in high school, back in my teenage years or so, are probably shocked to realize that I'm doing things like podcasts and public speaking and that sort of stuff. Because yeah, I was really crippled, I would say, by my shyness.
Yeah. And what have you done to change that?
Well, I think some things just sort of happen. When you're that young, you're just kind of stupid. At least I was. I didn't know. I mean, I knew I was shy, but I didn't know that I could actually fix that. Like, I didn't know that was something I could change. A lot of that was just my situation growing up. Some things that happened there that just sort of made me become really shut down, and I was scared. And I think ultimately it was a lack of confidence, which I didn't really recognize that as the thing. But then what actually triggered, I think, my first step out of shyness was I liked a girl. I was in 11th grade or 12th grade or something. And somebody bet me to go try out for a high school musical. I wasn't in the choir, but I sang a bit. And they kind of bet me to try out for this thing. And I did. And I got a spot in the chorus. I was really bad, but they were really desperate for male singers. So I got a spot in there, and I just loved it. Like, I literally just loved doing a musical. And I think because I was given a platform, I was given permission to kind of be free, like, because a director was telling me, oh, sing and dance and do this stuff, which stuff I never would have done in a million years on my own. I think that was sort of the first step for me to get a little confidence, and that I can have fun and I can be part of a group and I can be included in a group. And I think that started me on a journey toward more confidence, which ultimately pulled me out of my shyness. Because I think for me, there's different kinds of shyness, right? And for me, it was really just lack of confidence. Like, nobody's going to accept me. I'm not going to step out here. I'm not going to, go to that party. I'm not going to go to the football game. I'm not going to do those things because I'm not going to be accepted. They're just going to laugh at me. And so this one event, I think, started pulling me out of that and made me realize, well, maybe there's a group of people that will accept me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I've talked about this a lot on the podcast for me, and I think a lot of shy people, it's kind of the circumstances that we grow up in that cause us to become shy, which goes completely against what you might believe, that it's genetic, that it's hereditary, that it's something you're stuck with. And I see so many people who believe that they're stuck with it, who believe that that's just who they are. And in a way, that's the starting point for this Shining Beyond Shy journey, to realize that it's not you. It's like, for me, I had a very critical dad, and the safest thing for me to do was to shut up and be quiet. And so I learned how to do that, and found my own way through.
Well, I think we're on the same page with that. Like, that was my deal. I think, I grew up, it was pretty rough. The first marriage from mom, and then after that it was okay, but it was different and that sort of thing. But I think it was a combination of that environment and my personality as an introvert. Like, I am an introvert. That hasn't changed. I don't get my energy from people. I still need downtime. I still get exhausted after a podcast interview, whatever it might be. That hasn't changed. But I think when you combine that sort of my predisposition to being by myself with that background where you grow up with no money and you don't have the right clothes and you maybe talk funny and some days you smell and you can't afford to buy school lunch and some of those things, where, those are where teenagers and people in school can be very ruthless toward kids that don't have. And so I think you combine those two things and you just withdraw and you just go inside and you're just like, I'm just going to grit my teeth and I'm going to bear it and I'm going to get through another day of school.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I love, again, something that I talk about in a different way from the way you talk about it, but one of the ways that we change that is being around supportive people who, as you say, accept you. It's like when you've been in that space of not being accepted and, like you say, gritting your teeth to get through, and then suddenly you find a supportive community. It's like, I know for me, when I found that, I was like, if I'm actually going to dare to step out of my shyness, actually these people aren't going to be critical. I can dare to share part of me, which I guess is ultimately what I was hiding with the silence. It's like not being willing to be me as I was growing up.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it's, it's a risk, and because the longer you're in that sort of stage of this is safe with just me, and whenever you step out and somebody tramples on you, you shut down more and more. So it's a risk to put yourself out there. For the musical thing, for me, I was kind of forced into it. And luckily, everybody in that group just sort of accepted me and embraced me because I'm a math nerd, but there's also like, they were theater nerds, right? Like there's this group of people that are in the theater that they're usually, a lot of them aren't, mainstream. They're not the cheerleader football player type. They're sort of this separate group of people. And I think they embrace people so well. And I think that's true, what you said. So as I went through life, as I got a little bit older, I got involved in church. And I think part of that was, I was figuring out what I believed, but part of that I think was I just wanted a group of people that would accept me, and they did. And so I think as I look back on my life, I look at those periods of time where I just got involved in things where I felt like I was going to be accepted more so than what I was maybe even interested in. And then I went into the corporate world as an actuary. I'm a math nerd, and I was accepted by the other math nerds because I could do the math. I could do the work. And I think that grew my confidence because they're like, oh, hey, we want you to work with us on this project. And it didn't really even matter the personality. I was just wanted. I was valued. I was needed. And so, yeah, to your point, man, part of that journey out of shyness is find a group of people or find a couple of people that you just feel safe, that will accept you for who you are, that will give you freedom to be who you are, and even allow you to talk about your baggage if that's part of it. And I think that feeling safe is so critical, at least for the version of shyness that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. For me too. And just looking back, I hadn't really thought about it, but actually it's true that some of the communities I joined, it's like, it was such a relief when I found people who would just accept me for who I am. And
and then as I've gotten older, it's sort of like I've kind of tried to build those communities myself as I've shifted from a contributor into a leader of things. I've formed a number of communities, and they're all around. Man, I look back, like I started this poker podcast and created a community around poker, but the whole vision of it is to be a positive, encouraging poker learning community. Like the idea is, you're not part of this thing if you're not going to be inclusive and engaging with other people. And I've kicked people out of that thing that weren't, accepting people in the right way. And I think that was probably informed by my own desire to be included, that now when I form communities, I'm so hypersensitive to making sure that we are setting a culture where people are included. We are not going to, berate people. We're not going to make fun of people, whatever it is. If you're going to do that, go find a different community. And so I think that's even informed how my leadership has evolved.
Yeah. And I was going to find your way to come to this. So nowadays, one of your main things is helping leaders become happier. And I was actually just thinking about my journey with shyness and other people I meet. And there's a sort of a strange thing. It's like, if I look back on me, it's like I had a fairly successful career in the corporate world. I mean, it was actually limited at a certain point because of shyness and lack of confidence, but I actually got quite a long way. And then I then was like, oh, I don't like the corporate world. I'm going to go and be in the charity world. And I had quite a demanding job actually in India for the Red Cross. And again, I think people who were close to me knew that there were some things that were either really difficult or that I wasn't really coping with, because it was like too much with the shyness and my views of myself. But to a casual observer, it would appear that I was actually really successful. And I just think that's interesting with what you're talking about, because it's like shyness doesn't necessarily stop people wanting to succeed in their lives or become leaders. So I wonder if you have anything to say to that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like our journeys are very, very similar. I went well into the corporate world, was doing really well, a number of promotions. And like you, I left at one point, went and worked for a nonprofit, went back to the corporate world. And the reality is, yeah, on paper, everything was perfect. And I had a really good career, but there were times when I was completely miserable. And I talked quite a bit about this. And it wasn't a chemical depression, anxiety like some people have. It was just sort of what I call the good life trap. Like, my life was so good on paper. If you look at my life on paper, right? Like, okay, man, he was just employee of the year and he got promoted. His marriage is great. His kids are loving him. And it's just really, everything's perfect. And that's how I felt. Like, I really felt like my life was perfect, but I was miserable. And I couldn't figure out what was going on and what made it worse. And I think this has to do with shyness. I do. But I think I was put into situations that were outside of my comfort zone. And I was wrestling with this. And part of the big problem was I felt like I had no right to complain. Right. And so I'm trapped, I'm miserable, but I have no right to complain. Who should I complain to? Right. Like, I'm a white middle-class male in the United States who's making a great living and has a great family. Like, what right do I have to complain? And who's going to listen anyway? Am I going to complain to my mom who, was scrambling, working 4 jobs so that we could rent out the basement of a house, when we were young? And I'm going to tell her, oh, I'm really miserable because of my life is perfect, and it was just sort of all of that kind of struggle. So I think people that are shy and lack confidence, like I think am at my core in a lot of ways, it's harder for us to actually release that into people that we trust to talk about that. And so I think a lot of us sit in misery, knowing that we are not doing what we are really wanting to do and really how we're wired to be. And we just kind of sit there in misery a lot of times. And so I think that's a very common story. As I've started telling my story about being miserable in a great job and in a great life, people are resonating with that, going, that is me. And some people never break free from that. Some people do, but I think it is related to our confidence and our shyness, that we just kind of sit there in misery a lot of times.
Well, I know for me, it's like one of the things, it's like I see that shyness is obviously, it's about the voice and being able to express yourself, but actually your whole life is an expression of you. So my choice to be an accountant was actually pleasing of my dad. It wasn't actually, not that he was pleased, but that's another story, but it was actually designed to please him. It was nothing to do with me. But I mean, I was like aged 18 and aged 22, finishing school, finishing university. I was basically told, well, you can be a teacher, you can be a lawyer, you can be an accountant. And I think, or I mean, I don't think I ever considered it. You can be a doctor. I wasn't wired to be a doctor. But it was like, this is your choice, nothing like ballet dancer or opera singer or anything, nothing like that. That would have been considered really bad.
That's the same thing. And I think, nobody in our family had ever gone to college. So there was no mentors or anything like that. And it was my mom's dream. And frankly, it was my dream too, to be able to go to college. But yeah, so I was good at math in high school. And then, hey, well, what you should do is you should go to college and get a math degree. Okay. So I went to college and got a math degree. I graduate there and they're like, well, what you should do is you should become an actuary. Okay. So I became an actuary. And I'm not saying any of this stuff is bad, but like, it was never really my choice. Like, I never really sat there and said, what could I do? What should I do? What's best for me and how I'm wired? What is my personality like? Where would I really thrive in my heart and in my life? And no, it was just, I just kind of did what I was supposed to do next. And even like, oh, you get offered a promotion. Well, you should take it. Like, that's the corporate game. Or, they ask you to move over here. Well, like, you should do that. And I talk a lot about getting should on. Right? Like we allow ourselves to get should on, people tell us, here's what you should do. Here's what you should do. Or even internally, here's what I should do. And I think what we do is we end up making so many of our decisions casually, either by default, because this is what has always been done, right? Well, anybody in your situation has always done this. So you should do this, or what we should do, or what other people expect of us, and we make our decisions and we end up, what we find is we end up living somebody else's life. We're living the life that somebody else envisioned for us. And again, kind of what you're saying, kind of what I'm saying is, it doesn't mean it's a bad life. Like, my life has been really, really good. And it's, in the top 1%, I'm sure of benefits for life, right? Because I have a house, I have running water, I have a family that loves me. And I mean, my life is great, but I look back and I go like, it really wasn't my life that I lived. I just kind of got lucky that the voices around me gave me advice that was good enough. But now here I sit on the other side of 50 years old wondering, did I even live my own life? And what does that even look like now? After 50 years, do I even have the vision and the capacity to live the kind of life that I want? And what is that? So yeah, I think you and I are very similar that way.
Yeah, that's really interesting, all those questions in there. What is that I would like? And that's how I see the journey of shyness continuing. It's like, yes, you learn to speak up, but then way beyond that is to start to learn what's actually true for you. What would you actually like to have in your life? And fortunately, we can change our lives whether we're 50, 60, 70, 80, or even 90.
Right.
I remember having a lady in my class.
Oh, we do. Right?
Yeah, there was a lady in my, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, I just remember very fondly a lady who came to my class who was 75, and she was like, not only are my children saying that I shouldn't be here, but my grandchildren are saying I shouldn't be here. And you know what I say, what I'm finding in this class is making me happy. And I'm just, she was just like, look, I'm 75. Why wouldn't I have a happier rest of my life? I mean, that could be 25 years. Who knows how long she's going to live.
I love that. I love it so much. And I think, you touched on something about just knowing ourselves. And I do think that's the biggest hurdle. I don't know if you've experienced this with working with other people or yourself too, but for me and for the people I've worked with, that is kind of the biggest hurdle. Well, who are you? Like, who really are you, and what do you really want? Whether you're just as an individual or a small business owner, or a nonprofit leader, or having a career, or you're in college, whatever it is. I think we struggle with that of, well, who am I and what do I really want? And I don't think we know that, because I think we've been so programmed, or just because of societal norms, whatever it is, we've just sort of taken on what we should want for ourselves. And I think it's a harder question than people realize to really break into that and figure out what does make you happy. I think a lot of us don't really know. Well, I went to a football game, I enjoyed that. Okay, well, there's a clue in that, but is that really what makes you happy? I don't know. And so if you're going to pursue happiness, it has to be some intentionality behind it.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah. But it's interesting because it's like you and I have had these experiences, and with the age we are, and I don't have children, but you just said you have children. It's like, I see you say with my nieces that the way that they've been brought up is very different from the way I was brought up. And they actually have much more clarity at the ages of, I think they're now 19 and 22. They have much more clarity on what's true for them, and much more confidence. They're like, well, Auntie Fiona, I think it's this and this. And I'm like, oh my God, when I was that age, I was just floundering around, trying to please my dad. So, so my sense is that it's like it's starting to change. That's one of the ways that it changes.
Yeah, I think
all the brave people being parents.
Yeah, I see some of that in some of this generation. I see some the opposite too, but I do think you're right in general. I think it's moving in that direction. And I think part of it is technology has allowed some of that to happen. The generation before us, at least where I'm from, like, what are you going to do? Well, we're all going to go work at the cheese plant. In Pennsylvania, they might go work in the coal mines. Like, if you can just get a job doing anything, you just get a job and you go work from 8 to 5, you come home, you have a beer, you turn on the TV, and then you go to bed. And then you do that every day. Like, there just wasn't as many options. And then, now in my era, more of us are, through government programs or whatever, we can go to college. Because, if I was a generation before, I never could have gone to college. There were no government grants or scholarships to allow that. We didn't have the money to do that. But now an opportunity to go to college. So I had new opportunities that I could kind of do that. And then, now with, we can go anywhere in the world in 24 hours, right? I've been to Rwanda, Africa 4 times and things like that 50 years ago, that's not a possibility to do that. And now you look at this generation and with technology, I mean, they can just create their own job, right? So I think they still might struggle with understanding themselves, but whatever they want to do, they can pretty much do. Like, my daughter put herself through college buying and selling thrift clothes online through Instagram. Like, she would go to a thrift store and she buys the clothes for $1, $2. She finds some good deals and she sells it for $40. And like that, she didn't get rich on that, but she made more than she would have working retail at a store. And she loves it, right? She loves thrift shopping and that sort of stuff. And so, I think there's opportunities for people to really explore who they are and then kind of do those, versus maybe in prior generations, you just kind of like, well, that's a dream that's never going to happen. I got to go down to the coal mine,
I don't know why I'm laughing, but I don't think I would have managed very well in those times. I don't think I would have.
But you would have, right? You would have adjusted to it.
Yes, exactly. It's
right.
True.
I think the same thing. I think I never could have survived, the 1800s and just living out in the prairie and, with a log home and all that stuff. But they did. You would, you're more resilient. And I think that's even part of our shyness problem, is that I think we don't realize how resilient we are, how much we can actually go through. And I think people that have gone through shyness are probably some of the most resilient people that are out there, because that's hard. That if you can still get up day after day in a world where you're incredibly shy, you are resilient. I mean, that is tough to do when you don't want to go to school, or you don't want to go to that party, or you don't want to go to work because you're shy and you're nervous and all of those things, but you do it. Like, that's courageous.
Yeah. It's interesting because I see that with the people I work with who at a certain point are like, hey, I really like to change this. The courage that it takes to actually change shyness, because it's like it inevitably at some point involves speaking up, showing up.
Yeah.
And it's like it's really hard for people.
It can be really, really tough. I think, for me, it was sort of finding this, how do I overcome shyness? Where am I comfortable? Where am I less insecure? Where do I feel that? And, the clues were in that first situation where I did that musical play, right? Hello, Dolly was the name of the play. And, but I did that. And I think what I found through that, and I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back now and looking back at all of my situations, when I am the most confident is when I've been given permission to speak. My shyness takes form of, I'm not going to bud my way in. And still to this day, like if I go out to eat with 4 people or 6 people and they're having a conversation, I'll just sit there and not say anything. I'm not angry. I'm not whatever, but I'm not going to fight for space to talk. Like, I've got a lot to offer. I think, oh man, I got some good things I could say about that, but I just kind of sit back. And if somebody says, hey, Steve, what do you think about that? I'll chime in, and I'll chime in confidently, but I'm not going to force my way in. And so that's a form of my shyness. So what I had learned for me is that I need to give myself or receive permission to speak. And that pulls me out of my shyness. And so things like doing theater, where, okay, well, this is your line is now, it's time for you to speak. I've hosted a lot of podcasts. I've been on as a guest. I've done, radio shows. I've done theater, I do public speaking, I'm a keynote speaker. Like all of those things are things where somebody says, okay, we want you to share what you know about this. And that's where I'm very confident. Like in this, I feel like I'm very confident. I love talking about this. I love, hearing your ideas. But if this was like a panel of people and you were having a conversation with 3 or 4 other people, I would just probably sit back in the weeds and let it go, because I'm not secure enough, or I'm not confident enough, or I don't think my thoughts are that great where, I need to butt in. So for me, anyway, a long answer here, but I think it's important to figure out what the source of your shyness is, and then what are some strategic things that you can do that'll actually put you in a situation where you overcome that shyness. And then I think as you can do that stuff, it starts to flow out to the rest of the world, right? Now I can be more confident outside of just being on a podcast. But that's where it starts.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because I think it's true that as you start to change the shyness, even in small ways, it actually affects the whole of your life. You think it's about the voice, you think it's about not being able to speak to people, or some people I know can't even go out of the house.
Yeah.
But it's like, as soon as you start taking these small steps, which can be really intense, but actually the whole life changes and everything opens up, which I guess makes sense, because shyness is so much about closing down, that as you take one step to open up, actually so much more can open up in your life.
Right. And so that, yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, there's different, places of shyness and that sort of thing for people that are really crippled by it. I guess the question is, yeah, when have you ever felt like confident, or, is there ever a time where you felt not shy, and then figure out, okay, what's the real core of that? Well, I didn't, we had 3 people came over, we watched a soccer game. Okay. You felt good about that. Okay. Does that mean you have to just watch soccer over and over and over again? Maybe, maybe not. Usually there's some principle in there. What was it about that? And that's where sometimes people need help, somebody to ask them questions, to say, all right, what was it about that? Was it the people? If different people were with you doing the same thing, would you have felt the same way? If the same people were with you, but you were having dinner instead of watching soccer, like, you got to kind of dig a little bit to kind of get that clarity and figure out, oh, that is what it was. What it was is that I was in a living room on couches with people that I loved. Okay, well, now we're getting somewhere. Now we can start to maybe try to reproduce that environment somewhere else. It had nothing to do with soccer game. It was the people that you love on couches. All right, how can we get more of that in your life?
More couches and more nice people in our lives.
Well, right, exactly. Okay, where else are there people that accept you that sit on couches? Where does that exist? Maybe it exists. Maybe you have to create it. But I think that's a good first step. But I think it starts with that knowledge of figuring out what really is driving my shyness, and what really is behind those situations where I haven't felt as crippled by my shyness.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. We're coming up to close to the time to end the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to share or add for our shy? And some people who listen to this aren't shy. I was going to say they just like me.
Well, that's good.
Anything else you'd like? Which is good, yes.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
This is a good conversation. Yeah. I think it's just a great conversation. I mean, if you're interested in kind of what I do, you might have it in the show notes. Just go to stevefredlund.com. I do some stuff out on LinkedIn. I've got my thing, this daily thing I do called Your Daily Stool, which is intentionally supposed to sound kind of funny, but just sort of my thoughts on the world and how things operate in my life and that kind of thing. But this isn't about self-promoting me. It's really about seeing if I can add some insight to folks that are shy, or the people that like you. For some reason, there are people that like you. I guess that's a good thing. But no, I would say just I think clarity. I found as I'm digging more and more into all these different elements of life, I think clarity plus intentionality is what equals happipiness. And, you can be intentional, but if you don't have clarity, it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland, where if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, and if you have clarity, but you're not intentional, well, great. You're self-aware, but you're not changing your life. You're not adding to happiness. So I would just encourage people, whatever that looks like for you, clarity of who you are and what you want to do and where you want to go, and then intentionality around taking steps to get in that direction. And I think that's what leads to ultimately our happiness, because our happiness is defined by what we want, not by what other people want. And so it's going to be different for everybody. And I think if you're just saying, well, boy, they look really happy, I'm going to try to model myself after their life, I think it's usually going to be pretty disappointing. So you just have to figure it out for yourself. So there's a lot of introspection, and then there's actually action that you have to do to get there. And I think it applies to shy people as well.
Yeah, no, I love the way you talk about that. And it's funny, I was actually joking about something very similar. I was like, well, if everybody wanted my life, everybody would be moving to Zagreb and dancing all the time. It's like, well, surprise, surprise, not everybody wants that.
Right.
I personally don't understand why, but there we go.
Yeah, your life sounds really good until you talk about moving there and dancing all the time. Then I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm out. Too far.
Oh, it's a total pleasure to meet you and to laugh and to talk about, well, shyness and creation and happiness and life. And yes, so your links will be in the show notes, so that if anybody wants to find out more or listen to your daily musings, then they can find you. So that's great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Fiona. It's a pleasure to meet you. I love what you're doing here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I'm so grateful for you. It would be great if you could subscribe, great if you could leave a review wherever you're listening. And if you'd like some quick, simple tips to overcome shyness wherever you are, please go to my website, fionacuts.com, where you can download my free product, 5 Steps to Overcoming Shyness Wherever You Are. Thank you again, and see you next time.